All right, we're back. Another episode, Jack of all trades. This episode, we're gonna uh, continue on with the NFC, the draft. We're gonna go with the NFC South today. Jack, like we've done in previous episodes, we're gonna take a look at a consensus number. The top 50, 60 analysts have come up with grading some of the players that are gonna come into the NFL. We base that off of a 1,000 point scale, right, where the number one overall pick, Joe Burrow, would be worth 1,000 points, and it descends all the way down to 1 point for some of the last guys in the later rounds. But let's go ahead and get into the NFC South. Which team you want to start with?
I got Carolina right here.
Okay, perfect.
Which is they had a big draft because they had a bad season, so they had some value picks. Those high value picks, according to this scale and this consensus, is 426 points. And I'll just go over their first pick, and that was Brown from Auburn, the defensive tackle. And this was it's hard when you're picking seventh to get value because there's only 6 players that could bring value to the seventh pick of the draft, and they actually got the fifth best player, which is a lot of value in itself. So just a way to look at the scale too is like, okay, the fifth player is worth 468 points, and they're picking at the 426 point spot, so they picked up an extra 42 points according to this scale. So again, it's like, if you want to argue with 50 or 60 people, you can certainly do that, and sometimes you'll be right, sometimes you'll be wrong. But in this exercise, I think it's a good measure of value, and we've talked in the past how this consensus of 50 or 60 draft analysts does a fairly comparable job to the NFL draft as a whole. When you're looking down the road to like, oh, how good are they at assessing value? So it's a legitimate way to grade drafts. And so Carolina, they had a big expected return in their draft. They made some trades here and ended up with 708 points where they're drafting from, and then their net haul was 143 above expected points. So they end up with an 851, which is an absolute, ton of points. I mean, Miami, this is a high pick team. They got 900 and some. Washington, super high pick team at 800. But you go to a team like Atlanta, expecting 500, they got 350. Just to kind of, these are just on my sheet to look around. But 850 points of value is a lot of value just at face value. But the fact they did it with an expected 708 or 691, however you want to look at the expectation, they overachieved.
Yeah, I like what Carolina's doing. They bring in Teddy Bridgewater. I think he's a high end guy. I like the move there. Obviously, they struggled with the Cam Newton injury, and they get some new coaching coming in, right? So we'll see what they do. It looks like they got some really good value out of that draft. Speaking of quarterbacks, maybe we should take a look at what Tampa Bay is doing, or what they did in there. They could bring in Tom Brady and the Gronk.
Yeah, I mean, what's funny is last year, and the kind of the way I look at things from year to year, and look at things on a regression and on how you do on models like DVOA and 538 points models and efficiency models. I was a big fan of Tampa going into last year as being an underrated team, but I was kind of a fan of Jameis Winston, and then he goes out there and commits all these turnovers, but he's really explosive downfield, and Tampa was this good team that just threw a few too many interceptions that kept them out of being a playoff team. And personally, I thought, like, give Jameis Winston another year under Bruce Arians and make them, and all he has to do is just reduce the interceptions. Everything else can stay the same. And what they did was bring in 42-year-old Tom Brady, and I'm just not that excited about that. I'm excited about it as an NFL fan to see what, but I don't think it's like this. Oh yeah, they're a Super Bowl team. Like maybe, like big maybe. In my opinion, it's a huge, huge maybe. I think it's a bigger maybe than it would be if all you were trying to do is get Jameis Winston to throw less interceptions. That's just my and I think most people disagree with me. They think, oh yeah, Tom Brady's so great, he's going to come in and and change everything. But we just don't know how Tom Brady looks in a new offense, and we don't know how Bruce Arians' offense looks with a guy who can't push it down the field. Like that's what Jameis could really push the football down the field. And I'm sorry, Tom Brady, his best business is done on pre-snap reads and being quick with the ball and knowing where to go with the ball. And it's not to sit back there, let guys run deep routes and throw deep. So I know none of this has to do with their draft other than how I see Tampa on a value thing. I don't think things are interchangeable. Now their draft, they were 575 and they picked at 546 and they got 589, 541. So, they had quite a bit of value because they were a 7-win team and they got some value. I know they traded up to solidify their first pick on the offensive line. Let's just go look at the first pick real quick. Yeah, Tristan Wirfs, Iowa, solid guy. But that's, how that's kind of a value future pick. I feel like when you're the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and you just signed Tom Brady and you're kind of in an all-in mode. I'm sure Wirfs can step in and play. I don't know if he'll be a Pro Bowl tackle right away, but as far as the draft, it's pretty not as sexy. It's just right there, right on value, and decent draft. But I think the real excitement in Tampa is certainly Tom Brady won't throw the interceptions that Jameis did, but can he throw for 5,000 yards and keep that, downfield Bruce Arians style offense to actually make, that big jump, to being a 500 team to being a Super Bowl team.
Right. Yeah. It's certainly. I can't wait as an NFL fan to see how these teams perform. It seems like Tampa Bay was a pretty well balanced team already, and Jameis Winston. I don't think we've heard the last of him. He goes over to the New Orleans Saints, right as a backup, and he's going to sit behind Drew Brees. And they had a good season last year. So let's take a look at the New Orleans Saints and how they performed in this year's draft.
Yeah, so the Saints are the very typical Saints draft in that they mortgage, like they're just aggressive, right? And I've talked about them before. Is they're a win now, mortgage everything because they do have a guy who's the last handful of years has just been unbelievable in Drew Brees. And when you got a great quarterback, it's like you're gonna have a good team. And a few dominoes fall and you win 13 games, and if it goes poorly, you win, 9, 10, 11 even. So the question is, can they get that kind of play? But they, they went out and got Cesar Ruiz in the first round, interior lineman. I think that's the second year in a row they've taken an interior lineman, and there wasn't a lot of value to that pick. And that's not a high value position. So it's kind of an odd pick, in my opinion. But like I said, the Saints in value aren't exactly what they're looking for. I think they're looking at like this guy can start now for them. And they let their free agent guard go. And so they were more concerned of picking a guy who they know they need, who they really project to be a starter right away, as opposed to going out and picking for value at a value position like receiver and having to let them work in as over the next couple of years, because for them there is no next couple of years. For the way they are operating, the future is completely now. They had good value in their second pick. Now I'm trying to see. Zach Vaughn. So that's an edge rusher from Wisconsin with the 74th pick. It's a 63-point pick, and they got a guy, who was projected as a late first rounder as an edge rusher. Again, I think they're thinking this is a need. This is a rotational guy. This is a guy who's going to contribute this year. And then with their next pick, they traded up with the Vikings, traded their whole draft away at the time, and
Yeah.
and took a high value it took a tight end at good value. They took a tight end, at the 106th pick. They took a guy who rates out much higher than that. Who was projected higher than that. And then they traded back in late to get a quarterback. It was a whole thing with against who were they going up against? What there was another Carolina. They got this kid who they thought Carolina was going to sign as an undrafted free agent. And let's go down here. I think it's Maywood or Tommy Stevens. So they get this Tommy Stevens from Penn State, who was going to be kind of who Carolina had connections with, and supposedly he'd already negotiated a free agent deal, and then Sean Payton, just to be a fly in the ointment, like trades up just to take him because they basically he had gotten word that he wasn't going to be able to sign him as a free agent. So and with the idea that I don't even think the Saints with Jameis, like you said, and Drew Brees and what's his face, the tight end / whatever, quarterback, tight end, running back. What's his name?
I don't know. I forget now that I'm thinking too hard about it. But yeah, the multi-talented, the player that he's a good player. I don't know that. Can't remember his name, but
these mental blocks at age 50. I mean, this is guys. Taysom Hill. Hill. Household name. I can't even. I don't like the guy, to be honest with you. I think it's a joke that people think he's going to be a quarterback. There was a report this week. If you heard, who was it? Was it one of those quote newsbreakers comparing Taysom Hill to a bigger version of Lamar Jackson, and that's just an absolute joke. Taysom Hill has only thrown like 13 passes. He's like 30, 31 years old. Lamar Jackson is the freaking reigning MVP. Okay. Like Lamar Jackson is a superstar in his second year in the NFL, MVP in his second year in the NFL. And Taysom Hill's been practice squad at Green Bay, and he's been he plays on the punt team and the punt block team and the field goal team for the Saints, and he plays tight end half the time, and he's not, if he was any good at quarterback, they wouldn't have had Teddy Bridgewater, and you're telling me, oh, and now he's going to be a great quarterback? Like, well, why'd they sign Jameis Winston? It's ridiculous. An insult to Lamar Jackson. Anyway, not a fan.
Yeah, let's pump the brakes on Lamar Jackson comparisons. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow, you really have to be, I don't know what you're doing there, but yeah, no comparison. So, yeah, that leaves us with Atlanta Falcons. The Atlanta was just in the Super Bowl not that long ago. They had a down season last year, but aren't they kind of in the same situation as New Orleans where they pretty much have their team in place and they're kind of going all in now to win now?
Well, yes and no. Yeah, I think they're all in now. I think it's a little different in that I don't think Matt Ryan is like on his last legs like Drew Brees is. He's mid late but he's in his late prime, I would say. But they're definitely win now because I think their coach and GM are like going to get fired if they don't win now. And I agree with you, kind of like they were just in the Super Bowl. They've had some bad luck. As far as a draft standpoint, they don't go for value very often. I've been super critical of their drafts. I got a friend who's a big Atlanta Falcons guy, and he made some good arguments on, like, well, you're trying to win and you're trying, you got to pick somebody. And I still, say that, to keep yourself in a winning position that you want to. So here's last year to reference, they were expected 518 and drafted at 581, and they only reaped, 294 points of value. Um, these first couple of picks were just massive, massive reaches. So I can't get behind that, because that to me is how you backlog, not having enough. If you're going to draft these guys, trade back and get more picks, because people aren't going to reach that hard very often. And so if you do it 8 times, you may miss your guy once, and 7 times you're going to get your guy, and all 8 times you're going to get a whole bunch of more capital. And so this year, first round, 305-point pick, and they go out and get, a minus 150-point guy. Now, who was it? AJ Terrell. Now, it's a value position, so I'll give him some credit for that at corner, but it's just a guy that people didn't have. And if it wasn't Atlanta, I might even cut him some more slack. But when it's a team that has reputation for not caring about value, I'm just going to say, okay, here's another example of them not caring about value. And then they wonder why there's holes in their roster when they have some injuries and they fall so fast. But all that being said, I don't think they were that far last year as maybe it seemed. And with Matt Ryan, and if a few things fall their way, I'm not so I don't think they're a terrible team. And so in the NFL, a few good breaks and they could be right there.
Yeah, it looks like a lot of reaching going on there. Like you say, they're throwing all value to the. I'm certainly excited for this NFL season. Can't wait to see some of these teams go head to head, match them up. A lot of great quarterback battles, and should be highly entertaining. But yeah, we have more information over on our podcast. Just look for the logo. If you like what you've seen here today, be sure to hit the like and subscribe button. And thanks for tuning in. And be sure to tune in next time on Jack of All Trades.